from out of town. Oh, yeah. So we want to say welcome to everybody for MidWeek Debrief Week 9. We are talking about complexity today. That was our theme last Sunday. And so I just wanted to debrief it a little bit and then look forward to what we're going to be doing in the coming weeks. So I am a big fan of complexity because, as I said on Sunday, that it is more reflective of reality, because reality is pretty complex, and any subject that comes up. And so when we've been provided overly simplified conceptions of it, it's like a gift actually of deconstruction is to point out how complex things really are. But at the same time, I recognize that it is exhausting to try and map and chart and attend to account for all of the variables. Oh, hold on. We have somebody else joining us. We'll say hi. So it is, there she is.
There she is.
Greetings. I was just in the middle of recapping complexity and talking about how exhausting it is. So on one hand, the upside is it's more reflective of the nature of whatever topic we're talking about. And on but the downside is it is utterly exhausting to try and account for all of the variables in any given equation, and then trying to make sure that you understand how complex or complicated issues are. So I just thought we could use 3 snapshots today that came up this past weekend that I thought were really interesting. So one actually came from Jan. She talked about the nature of for-profit everything within capitalism. And honestly, I thought that was a wonderful example. And Jan, you articulated it so well with, multiple points. But, if you just look at even, for instance, education, right? I had thought I wanted to go into education. Religious education was my PhD sort of umbrella within practical theology. I was a professor for a year. But I got to tell you, having watched how graduate theological education had changed from the 10 years between when I went and 10 years later when I was a professor, it had changed so much. And it wasn't even at a for-profit institution. It was at a private institution. But I'm very aware that whether it's even our public schools now, right, with the way they have to do fundraisers to support extracurricular activities and so many other things, but that's just one example. But for-profit news, I was listening to a thing this week about how we have moved into a click-driven news, I don't know what you call it, environment. And so one of the reasons that when you have a salacious story, the reason that it gets so much primetime coverage is sheerly out of the clicks that it attracts, right? Well, the problem is then that the news begins to skew what it decides to cover depending on what gets the most clicks. And so you used to be able to say, well, we need to be able, to trust our news. Hi there. You look like you're at work. Yes. Okay. We're just talking about how complicated things are. And so right now we're using the news as one of our examples that came up on Sunday. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out that if you can't, I'm not saying you can't trust the news, but you just need to account for the fact that the news is skewed towards clicks. So that's an interesting decision-making rubric where they're not giving you maybe the highest priority topic, but that one royal is fighting with another royal, and like that's the headline. But that's not the most important thing happening in the world that day. That's just the thing that's going to get the most clicks.
Yep.
Right? So things are complicated, but anyway, Jan, did you want to say anything else about like the for-profit, that if everything is for-profit, like it really warps?
Well, I was raised in the age when we all took civics classes, and the statement made by the teacher is that government provided the services that enterprise business could not provide. You know, from road construction to prisons to social safety net. And now, I don't know how you can figure you're going to make profit on running tent camps for homeless people.
Oh.
I mean, that just boggles my mind that we've gone that far. And the for-profit prisons is criminal.
For-profit prisons are disturbing. Yeah. And I mean, even the way that we watched during the first Iraq war, you know, that we thought military, that's a government thing. But then we found out, like, oh no, it turns out that there's all these contractors behind the scenes that are, you know, profiting. And you're like, oh my gosh, this for-profit motive, it's in our education, it's in our military, it's in our medical, it's in our real estate, in our banking. It's wild that things that affect us so much as a society, that they're for profit now. And you like, it's like, it gives you a little bit of anxiety.
And you understand now why people knee-jerk and oppose toll roads. I mean, I know Chicago has always had. But out here, you know, not so much. And it's just this knee-jerk. What do you mean I got to pay to use the road?
That's hilarious. Yeah, Amy, out on the east, there, like in New Jersey, there are some pay roads and there are free roads, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And is that true in Pennsylvania too?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It never occurred to me that I hadn't seen toll roads when I was out in Oregon.
Yeah. West of the Mississippi, people aren't having it.
Really?
No.
Toll road on the, what is it? West side of Denver to get to Colorado Springs, that's quicker. And I love the fact that you can just drive it, and then a couple months later we get the bill. You know, they've taken a shot of the driver's license and tracked us down, and we pay our fee.
Oh my gosh.
Toll road. I mean,
and I don't mind so much paying a toll road if the money's going to the government. It's for profit that really bothers me, because somebody's cutting corners somewhere if it's private enterprise profit. You know, it's like for-profit prisons. The prisoners end up eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Wow.
You know, as opposed to getting decent, balanced nutrition.
So another topic that came up this weekend was from Siglinda, and she talked about our medical system and just medicine in general. So that was very interesting. You know, she has been in the medical profession for a long time. And I know that she's at a point in her career where she's actually gone back to school to study narrative medicine. And it's been so interesting to hear her reflections on, like, you know, helping people tell their stories. And so I thought it was very interesting that she brought up the medical field and how complicated that is. And I think everyone has become aware of it in the COVID past couple of years, that like issues related to medical anything are complicated. I know Elizabeth is on mute, but yeah. And
I don't have to be on mute.
oh, hi.
Do
you have anything? Do you have anything, as you're in your scrubs, do you have anything to say?
I mean, it's shoved down our throat often about being conscientious about opening stuff and charging to the patient. But then there's confusing statements made all the time too, you know, we're in this huge deficit. But then there's a gigantic monstrosity of a building being erected. So it's hard to comprehend what's being told with what we're seeing. And I don't know. It's just, I try to stay out of it. I try to not think about it. It's too daunting.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your honesty there, because when things are too complicated, they get overwhelming, it's easier to just go, yeah, I'm going to stay out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can be conscious of what I open and don't open for the sake of the patient, what they're being charged with, for sure. But then to be like inundated constantly, this is how much of a deficit we're in, this is how far into the red we're in, you know, this is where the problem is, this is where the problem is, and then all the bonuses for CEOs are published.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's hard not to go, okay, I'm saving this patient a 25-cent item. And then your bonus for the year was more than my entire salary.
Oh.
Well,
Kind of hard to have empathy for the day-to-day when you hear about stuff like that.
yeah.
Wow. That's an amazing example.
Well, and the bank that just went under, they paid their bonuses the day before they went under.
No.
Stop.
Huge bonuses to all
And then
these.
to find out a third of what that payout could have eradicated student debt. Like, oh gosh, I don't know how sad.
I had not heard that. I've been renovating my bathroom and not watching the news. I had not heard that.
Yeah.
I mean, you're up to your elbows in crap either way. So.
Wow. Wow.
You're just picking the lesser of the two evils.
Amazing. So another example that came up on Sunday in our conversation time was homelessness. And I think everyone recognizes this issue is more complicated than any of us really. I mean, even the best of us can figure out. And so I thought it was interesting. Yesterday, I had a friend in from out of town. And so I biked up towards the airport and we sort of met halfway. Oh, Amy, by the way, I went to the potato place that has the pulled pork on fries.
So good.
So we met at Cartopia, and as I was biking down Barber, there was a major production going on of pickup trucks and people in orange vests cleaning up that huge encampment on the east side of Barber. And I mean, I can't believe how big of a production it was, but I also couldn't believe like the amount of stuff in that encampment is unbelievable. I mean, it looks like a garbage heap you would see in like a third world country. And I just, thinking about our conversation on Sunday and how complicated the issue of homelessness is in Portland.
Well, and people try to look at the simple solutions in terms of, it's the cost of housing. Well, it's more than the cost of housing. It's also the minimum wage. It's also fair wage for the work that people do. There's issues of mental illness and support for people ill. There's issues of addiction. I mean, there's so many things that feed into that. It's not a one solution problem.
I actually, at first, I was a little confused when we moved from saying homeless to people experiencing homelessness. But I've actually really grown to embrace that because I have learned, through being a part of a network of people who are very concerned about this issue, that, if you were to just give everyone a home for a lot of the folks, it wouldn't fix the thing, right? That it doesn't get down to the root of the issue. And so just giving everybody a tiny home or something, right, isn't necessarily the support. So I just recognize how complicated it is. And while I love the Methodists and what we do, such a compassionate organization the Methodists are, sometimes I try not to be cynical, but it feels like it's just a Band-Aid on like a much, much bigger issue, All right. And then the last one I wanted to bring up is gender. Somebody brought up gender, and I didn't want to point you out, but yes, it was you.
You can.
Okay. And I was in a coffee shop this morning in between appointments. I was returning some emails, and these two lovely seasoned saints next to me were completely baffled. I think they had been over at Trader Joe's, and Trader Joe's is a very open and affirming organization, and that the people that were checking them out of the Trader Joe's were nondescript, let's say. It wasn't clear which of the two genders these people were. And so androgynous, yes. So they were trying to they didn't have the vocabulary, and they were working really hard to say both how confusing it is, but also they were clearly annoyed that, it was an inconvenience to them that it wasn't clear. And like one of their grandchildren has a teacher that looks like one and dresses like the other, but wants to be called Miss, but her first name. So, and they think that's wrong. Like it should be, if it's anything, it's Miss in your last name. So it should be the Miss and the first name really throws them off. And I was listening to these lovely people, and they weren't like being cruel or, bigoted. They were just completely like, what is happening right now? And like, you can't tell by looking at anybody, and you don't know what to call anybody. And it's all so confusing. And, and your grandchild's born one thing, and then they become another thing. And I understand for that generation why it might be really tough to be like, I don't know what to do. I get it.
Well, there's been so many things that have changed in the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Or 60 years.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if there's one thing that we know, it's gender, because that's just black and white. And it's kind of like the last straw for a lot of people. And I think that's a lot of what's behind the anti-trans movement. It's a lot of it behind the anti-woke movement. It's like, it's a bridge too far for many people.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it really shouldn't affect them. It's like, what does it matter if this person is male or female? Why does it matter?
So I have a theory. Oh yeah, you go ahead.
They like certainty, and you got to put that peg in the round hole. And when you discover the peg is square and you can't get it in, there is that generation that just struggles with that.
Oh, so I have a theory I would love to run past this group. Okay. And you can tell me if this doesn't work. Okay. Here's what I think may be happening. Because I listen to a lot of people who I don't agree with, who are really bent out of shape about issues like this. And I'm trying to understand where their discomfort's coming from. So I have a theory, and you tell me what you think of this theory. I don't know that the actual issue is gender. Okay? So I want to set that aside for a second. I think that what's really going on is that the woke thing is being, oh, you got to go? Bye. Oh, it was nice to have her on for a while.
There's a lot of noise happening outside. I didn't know there's some construction. I don't know if there was a. Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking to Elizabeth now.
Yeah, that's fine. Oh no, but that's fine. So I think that the real issue that I'm picking up on by listening to folks on the other side is the imposition of the woke understanding that it's being imposed on them, and in a condescending way, like, you backward, dumb, uneducated troglodyte. So I'll give you for instance, this is an issue. This is a story. I don't even know if this story ever really happened, but I've heard this story multiple times, and I'm actually thinking about using it in a sermon. So that a guy goes up to order coffee. Now I've heard this in multiple manifestations. So I don't know if baristas are the biggest offenders of wokeness, or if this one story has morphed and become sort of an urban legend, but I've heard this story multiple times. That that when somebody's ordering a coffee and they say, like, I'll have this, and my wife will, they get corrected by a woke barista that says, your partner. So this story, because I've heard it in multiple contexts, seems to be the example of where the offense is happening. Okay, so let me just stick with me for a second. I know it's not logical, but just this is where I think it. If you have an example like that, okay, and I've had that happen to me, where I've said, "Oh no, wife. I mean, we're like right. We've entered into a legal, right, long term. It's now I've used partner before to make other people feel comfortable, but now I did that before same-sex marriage was legal. But now that same-sex marriage is legal, I have gone back to referencing wife. But when the story is told me, I realize that what people are bristling at, if I were to put myself in their shoes, is being imposed upon incorrectly. So you don't know me, but you're going to correct me about my situation? So I think it's that is so offensive, and then that then gets applied sort of to gender, which is like, well, I don't know what to call you, and if I get it wrong, you're going to be offended, and I'm going to get corrected, right? But you correct me on things that you're wrong about, and that on my situation. So once the offense is made, and then it's like, and now I don't even know what you are, and I don't know what to call you, right? But it's like once the hackles are up, the offense, right, sort of bleeds over into other categories.
Though, how many, you say you've heard that story in many different circumstances, contexts. How many of those people did it actually happen to, and how much have they simply heard about it and they're repeating it because it makes them feel offended? It makes them, so I'm not sure if it's people are being inconvenienced by this or corrected by it, or they're just perceived to be condescended to. That may be part of it. And I think there is a large degree of condescension on the part of leftists, which I am a leftist, but I probably can be condescending at times. But I think it's just this, I think it's this uncertainty of where we stand, or people feel, how do I know anything anymore? If I don't know gender, if I don't know what to say, if people think I'm stupid because I'm, I think it's again, a complex issue of identity, of social position, of feeling of being condescended to. I think it's multiple things that go into it.
That's really interesting.
I think it's complex, Bo.
Ian, how does that, or Jan, go ahead, yeah.
I mean, Hillary Clinton's deplorables comment really is kind of that
Yes.
encapsulated condescension from the left. I wish she'd never made it, but it carries over into gender.
Interesting.
If don't impose on me your perception. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis just called her Oscar that she just won, they and them, to honor her trans daughter.
Okay.
So, but there are people that don't want that to happen. I mean, they find that, like the people you listen to, not only perplexing, but condescending because you're imposing your belief system on me. I don't want to have to say I'm they or them or he or him or.
Yeah, this is really. Oh, man, I'm so glad this came up, and I wish Elizabeth had been able to stick around. This was her example from Sunday. I wanted to hear what made her think about it. So maybe I'll ask her that on a different time. But when I first got into a doctoral program and I discovered queer theory, I mean, I took to it like a duck takes to water, man. I love queer theory. As a straight white guy, it made so much sense to me that we needed to queer the gender binary because it was hurtful to people on both sides of it, right?
Yes.
And so I have always used queer. I mean, for the last 12 years, I've used queer. And what's funny is, people will tell me like, oh, I don't like that word, or that's a really aggressive word or whatever. So I try and be, understanding with people for whom that's like an over the top, vocabulary word. But I have seen it being used recently in some interesting, good ways. And I'm sort of hoping that it makes a comeback because I think it functions in a way that could be helpful. So my problem with the leftists, by the way, since I'm not a lefty, my problem with the lefties is that they're so concerned about vocabulary and correcting people's grammar, but not making substantial changes to the concrete lived reality of the folks that are impacted. And so it's like policing people's words is super annoying to me, but not for the same reason as my conservative friends of being imposed upon. It's just that I just think, all right, so what? You get the word right, but it hasn't changed, right? So like, for instance, the reason I bring that up is like, for me, our transgender community, right? I sense the vulnerability and the persistent climate of violence in this country. That's my greatest concern, not vocabulary or pronouns. And I understand that there's a place for all of that, but for actual advocating for for everyone's safety and right to exist and to be not under the threat of violence. And so, I mean, that's my greatest concern. And so it's one of the reasons that I, try and understand the different perspectives on an issue, is that it does us no good to stand on two sides of a fence and throw rocks at each other, right? Because somebody's going to get hurt.
Or shout words at each other,
Yeah.
Well, and it just occurred to me too that, when the word gay was considered a pejorative term, so you didn't use, or excuse me, queer was pejorative, so people didn't use it. Well, men are gay, women are lesbians. That's very gender specific.
Oh yeah.
Queer is not specific.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
So I I'm a big fan of they as a pronoun. I just think it's a generic pronoun, and I've been advocating for like 8 years. I have a pin that says they is a valid pronoun, and I think I'm just going to start wearing it all the time. And like maybe somebody will ask me about it on either side of the issue, because it's the simplest way to sort of diffuse.
Yep.
Except that now it has become
Yeah. Hot button.
Yeah.
It's funny,
Yeah.
before I retired, I did a lot of documenting. I was working in data processing, so I'd write procedures and whatever else. And I got really tired of he, she. And so I started using they all the time in all the documentation I use.
okay. Yeah.
That's been going back, 10 years or more.
Aim, I know that you're on mute because there's construction in the background, but I would be interested. Do you have anything you want to say about gender, homelessness, medical stuff, or for-profit?
So much.
So much.
I'll just start with where we just were in talking about they. It was a handful of years ago, certainly pre-pandemic, but I was in a coffee shop, and one barista was trying to explain something to the other barista about I have a mushroom allergy, and they were trying to convey that like they want this, but not with the mushrooms because of an allergy. And they were using they, them pronouns about me. And I was like, I heard it and was like, that's really interesting, because I have a very like femme presenting heteronormative appearance. And I was like, that's fascinating. And I like it rolled around for a while in my head, and I was like, that is the easiest change to make ever. To just make it universal, unless someone says, oh no, actually I'm she, her.
Yeah.
And so I just started doing it then, and it's the easiest change you can make.
Oh, that's great to hear.
And it hurts no one. Like no one gets hurt, and everyone gets respect.
That's a fantastic example. Yeah, that's good.
As for the baristas correcting people thing,
Yeah, let's go there.
I'm sure that's happened
Yeah.
here and there. It feels to me like how somehow thousands and thousands of people all know some labor and delivery nurse who had a set of African-American twins born in their ward, who were named Arangelo and Lamangelo. And like, no, it's never, have you not heard this, Bo? You're making this face.
Wait, I'm listening. I'm just listening.
And I feel like half the people I know someone who's relayed this story as if some ill-informed mom didn't know what to do, and her meal came and there was orange jello and lemon jello, and she was trying to pick out the names, and she went with Arangelo and Lamangelo. And I've heard this so many times, and I'm like, that never happened.
No.
And no one is correcting across the board. Baristas are not correcting the relationship you described to yourself. It's just not true.
Interesting. All right. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say goodbye to our live crew. You guys hang around on Zoom for a second. We can go off the record. For everyone who's going to watch this later today and tomorrow, thank you for tuning in. We would love to know your thoughts. Go ahead and comment below, email with any questions, and we will continue this conversation next Wednesday. All right, so I'm going to log off. I just did Facebook, and now I'll say goodbye to YouTube. All right, so we are off.